something there. You know, it's like I feel like I'm just a guy shooting a gun. I can't tell the difference between the character that I'm playing, which I liked having characters. But what I don't like about Resident Evil, as much as I love it with a passion, from what my complaint that is festering in me is chainsaws. Resident Evil 4 had like 3-4 different types of chainsaw sub-bosses, bad guy people. You know, you had Dr. Salvador, who showed up, which, this is what I don't understand, okay? Don't give your character a distinct personality name, like a last name. Dr. Salvador, that's a last name. We don't know his first name. I haven't looked up the wiki for him, but a lot of wikis for the bad guys are very generic. They're like, yeah, this guy created by the C virus, and yeah, he was based on a human. I don't understand how some of these C virus from Resident Evil 6 are human based, but I guess the cocoon metamorphosis, it makes sense somehow. I just wish that there was more to it. Like, honestly, I wish each character had its own development. I love character development. Dr. Salvador, I think we see, which I know it's kind of a fun thing for the gameplay itself, and I love gameplay stuff like this for the sake of I'm a gamer, so for the sake of it's a game, it's fun, it's cool. But at the same time, for sake of continuity, which, you know, obviously I have a different part of me that loves continuity, you know, gamer side than storyteller side, you know, different, whatever. Dr. Salvador should be one guy. And I think he comes back at least 2 or 3 times. But we have the Chainsaw Sisters, which I don't know if they have any distinct names. I just know that fans, or at least I call them, me and my buddy who introduced me to the franchise, way back when I was in middle school, he had Resident Evil 4, and I was like, oh my god. People complain that it, like, went astray from the franchise, which I don't understand, because the whole point on Resident Evil is it is the horror, it is basically the pioneer and foundation of the, what is it called? Horror. It's like a horror movie that you can interact with. It is one of the pioneers in horror-based video games. A lot of the things that go on in a horror movie, like even subgenres like psychological horror, you know, gore horror, all these, you know, gore fest or whatever, jump scare, all these subgenres, which we'll get into jump scare on another day, because god, does jump scare piss me off. Not necessarily in video games, though I've not played that many video games to say that 100%, but Hollywood has abused the fuck out of jump scare genre. You know, a horror movie is supposed to be, in of itself, horror. It's supposed to be scary. It's supposed to be terrifying. It's supposed to be horrific. It's supposed to be nightmarish. It's supposed to be something we are afraid of. In one sense or another, we don't like it. We are afraid of it. You know, we essentially don't want to see this happen to us or in our neighborhood or something like that, you know? If something happens in real life and it's considered, you know, and people say who lived it, they're like, what happened to me came straight out of a horror film. They say that because, like, things like Ed Gein, you have this guy who keeps himself, he's kind of and whatnot. I'm not saying he's retarded, but I'm saying, like, you know, he's kind of stumbling, you know, he's like, oh, hey, George, you know, what's going, you know, whatever, and you find out that he murdered, like, your neighbor's mom or something like that, you know, just hung carcass in his garage like a deer, like he went out hunting and he just hunted this person. So, ultimately, you know, that's horrific. Resident Evil as a franchise was one of those defining things. Each installment, for at least the main series, the number series, was supposed to be interactive horror movie and supposed to be scary and terrifying, psychologically and otherwise. The deaths in there, the creatures. Imagine it's not a video game. There's no CG. Imagine this was something that stood in front of you. That is the concept of what some of these things are. Nostalgia Critic did a top 11. It was, I think, his very first Nostalgia Ween. I could be wrong on that. But he did a top 11 scariest performances. And he did it based on the concept of horror, you know. There was a character, one of the first ones, I think it was called Oliver or whatever. He talked about him and defined as like, you know, if this guy, he beat his wife or murdered her or whatever, he did all these things, even when he's trying to get his dog to come towards him, it's still very kind of like you're scared of what he's going to do with the dog. So, you know, that's the whole point on horror, and I don't think that as a company or as a storyteller or as a video game maker, the video game, again, it's supposed to be something, it's a game, but it's also a video. It's a video game. So a video is something that is supposed to, you know, inform you of things, of story or something. You know, it's supposed to be an interactive story. It's supposed to be a game, so it's supposed to be fun, whatever. But Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6, like after Resident Evil 4, they realized, oh, this got us a lot more money, you know, after we've had troubles or whatever like that. And they started replicating it. Like, you know, Resident Evil 4 went away from zombies and they went more towards mutation, and they went more towards parasites and things where you were becoming a mutant more than a zombie. They went more towards intellectual bad guys where they can, in Resident Evil 4, you know, they were triggered and everything by basically, you know, they lived their normal life and were villagers until an outsider came in, and then they become hostile. Even when you defeat the game, it shows that all the villagers and the priests and everything from the castle, they were normal. And granted, that could have just been sketches from them before they were given the Las Plagas, but still. Resident Evil 5 had another weird parasite, which is basically, hey, we discovered this, you know, and almost Umbrella and all the bad guy corporations and gangs and whatnot in and organizations in Resident Evil almost reflect the corporations and whatnot in our reality, where they realized something was big and, you know, it made them a lot of cash, and they keep going with it despite what the public thinks. Like they target drones basically, where people, they accept what is fed to them. You know, to quote a movie that I kind of like, I saw the original 3, and, you know, I kind of like it as I don't know, I kind of like the remake of RoboCop. Sorry, I do. And I'll go into that another time once I have a chance to rewatch the original 3 and the remake. Which, one thing that you have to keep in mind is that when you remake a movie, you oftentimes will, because you don't want to copy and paste it, which apparently is one reason why Psycho got, with Vince Vaughn, which I've not seen, got a lot of backlash, was the fact that it was a shot-for-shot remake. It was just, you know, had new characters and it was in color. And nobody liked that. So, and I can agree with that, even if I haven't seen it, which maybe I kind of probably will see it just because I'm curious. But when it comes to remakes, they should be, to one extent or another, modernized. You know, you are telling a story, but you have different tools to tell that same story. So the fact that he has modern technology put in him instead of just, you know, this retro tech where he's very which, if you look, I actually watched the movie when when I owned the original RoboCop and the remake, and I was like, okay, the movements of RoboCop in, like, even when he gets his, like, 3.0 suit or chip or whatever, I played the game, the mobile game, when it came out, and they called it, I think, 3.0, the black suit, basically. The black suit, you know, when he's doing that combat, he actually does the same exact movements. He does very stiff out, he just does it faster. That's the thing, is it's the same operating system, it's the same movements, it's just faster. And yes, I've heard complaints that, you know, just everything looks better in black, and that's not true. You know, sometimes it is when you just want nothing to clash, But when they originally brought him out and he's like, oh, this is a dream or whatever, he was in the original RoboCop armor. Like, it was just a modernized version of the original armor. And then they're like, let's make it black. Because it was a corporation decision. They're like, okay. Oh, yeah, sorry for the ramble. So this is the problem that our society has, that Star Wars, surprisingly, actually, I made full circle. Star Wars suffers from it. And so does Resident Evil, which is that in Resident Evil 6, they took the mutation factor, which apparently people liked enough for them to do, or maybe it was a continuity thing to where it's like, again, in that world and in our world, they're like, oh, this is a new thing. Let's exploit it as much as we can until we have nothing left to squeeze out of it. Touchscreen technology. Before Apple came along, as far as I'm aware, we had Coinstar. You go to Albertsons or you go to Walmart or Myers or whatever. I'm from California, so we have Albertsons and Vons. I'm now in Ohio. We have other things. If you go to any of these places, they have what is called a Coinstar. You dump your piggy bank in there and it will count your change and it will actually take 10% of whatever it is. So if you have a full piggy bank, you might lose about $1 worth of stuff. So you're better off actually going to a bank or actually going to a convenience store and say, hey, this is what I have. Believe it or not, they'll do this. Not always, it depends on the person. But some people will say, hey, I have all these pennies. Do you care if I exchange it for whatever it is? So if you have a quarter's worth of pennies, they'll give you a quarter. Some people, they'll do that because to them, their drawer as a cashier has to